What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Happy Monday. I know I started a little bit early, but I was ready a little bit early, and I was just sitting here, so I figured I would just start. But hope you're all doing well. Radio, glad to see you. Brangus, it's good to see you. Welcome in, Ken. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, man. What's up, Brangus? I hope you're doing well. Can't stay, but wanted to say hey and leave a like. I appreciate that, Brangus. Truly, I do. As well as the that package again, and just giving us the joy that we had this weekend was definitely fun. So I hope you have a good rest of your night, Brangus. And of course, if you ever need anything, and we got it, you got it. Just let us know. Hey, no worries at all, Mishins. I appreciate that and understand. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day as well. Appreciate you popping in for a second. I did start a little early. I figured I'll give this a rock and then we'll get back into our story. Before I did go any further, I did want to give a huge special shout out to Mr. Radio Hobbies in the chat, as he did construct this all by hand and drew this for me and painted it, and it just arrived in the mail today. So I wanted to give a huge shout out and a special thank you to you, sir, for all the amazing little ghosts that I do see on this. Where is he? There he is. And I already have the perfect spot on my wall for it, so we will do another unveiling on Thursday live, but this was just too sweet. I could not show it off, as well as all the little smiley faces within. Just really cool cameos, so super appreciate that, man. Awesome, right? Right? Oh, that's awesome. So yes, I do have a special spot on the wall all ready for it, so it will be pretty well seen in every live going forward, and that's just a testament to your talent, and I want you to keep going. So I really appreciate you, man. Thank you. And how was your Monday? How was your Monday, Radio? How was everybody's Monday? Did everybody get everything they set out to get? Is everybody just ready like me to kind of relax and read a little bit, get back into our story, which left off at a very, very interesting part, so I'm very excited to get back into it. Almost done now. Excellent. Hey, aloha, Big Island Angler. How are you? It's good to see you. I hope work hasn't been too tough for you, Radio. See you too, man. I'm good. How about yourself? I'm doing all right. It was definitely a Monday, and that's about all I'll say about that. But not to say that it was a bad Monday. In fact, I always like to tell people that Monday is actually my favorite day of the week. And people often question me. But I like to remind them that Monday is the longest possible time before another Monday. That's why Monday is my favorite day of the week. Because that Monday feeling, now you don't have to experience that for another 7 days. Ernie! How you doing, Ernie? I hope you're doing well, fam. Hope you're doing well, fam. Appreciate you popping in and joining us. We are going to finish this book today, so I'm pretty excited about that. Just to kind of recap while we wait for anybody that is fixing to come. Dorothy, Ozma, her gang have approached the Gnome King in search for the royal family. The Gnome King has made the royal family ornaments in his house. They said that they would like them back, so the Gnome King allowed them to enter his palace one at a time and choose objects within his palace and say the word Ev. This will turn, if they are, in fact, a person, it will turn them back into their person and they would be allowed to leave. However, if they were unable to guess correctly in their 11 or 12 chances, then they too would become an ornament within the palace. As it is right now, we've pretty much gone through absolutely everybody, and Dorothy and TikTok were the last to go. TikTok broke down, needed some winding, so Dorothy offered to go in and start her guesses as well. TikTok, unfortunately, did not make it, but Dorothy was able to find one of the children on her last guess, and they were about to exit the palace and go back to the throne room and tell the Gnome King that they've accomplished one. And we're going to see. But Belina, the hen, she holds a little secret. And that secret is the Gnome King kind of absent-mindedly just kind of unveiled the color of the royal family. He disguised them all as purple. The machines he disguised as gold, and then anybody from Oz is green, and that's his little code. So we'll see if we can figure it out. But Belina heard all of that, so we'll see what she does with it. Excellent. Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit that way myself, Ernie. I think I'm gonna have a little dinner after. Let's see. Right about 7 minutes, 5 past. We'll give it another couple minutes, but we're going to start chapter 15 here in a second. And yeah, I really appreciate you all being here. And absolutely, feel free to relax, close your eyes if you fall asleep. That happens. Hey, I appreciate that one, Thug. It's good to see you, fam. This is a little bit different of a tempo as normal. We typically just read. I don't know if you've ever joined us on a Monday, or if you have, I appreciate you coming back. But yeah, we're reading through the Wizard of Oz books right now, so it's just a nice chill way to relax and spend the rest of our Monday. It's good to see you, brother. Truly. It's always good to see you. Excellent. And we're in fact going to finish this book, and we'll be starting the next book next week, Monday. And that's always an exciting stream also, because I just like starting new books and meeting new characters and starting new adventures. So as childish as they are, there's a lot of dark undertones in these books, and I appreciate y'all joining me on this journey to Oz. Well, Ev in this book, but Oz, the great and powerful. Sweet. Alright, let's jump into it without further ado. It's been about 9 minutes, about 7 minutes past. And we'll start with chapter 15 before I finish my coffee. Now, when Dorothy had entered the palace to make her guesses and the Scarecrow was left with the Gnome King, the two sat in a moody silence for several minutes. Then the monarch exclaimed in a tone of satisfaction, "Ah, very good." "Who is very good?" asked the Scarecrow. "The Machine Man. He won't need to be wound up anymore, for he has now become very neat ornament, very neat indeed." "How about Dorothy?" the Scarecrow inquired. "Oh, she will begin to guess pretty soon," said the king cheerfully. "And then she will join my collection, and it will be your turn." The good Scarecrow was much distressed by the thought that his little friend was about to suffer the fate of Ozma and the rest of their party. But while he sat in a gloomy reverie, a shrill voice suddenly cried, "Cut, cut, cut-ah, cut, cut, cut-ah." The Gnome King nearly jumped off his seat, he was so startled. "Good gracious, what's that?" he yelled. "Why, it's Billina," said the Scarecrow. "What do you mean by making a noise like that?" shouted the king angrily at the yellow hen, came from under his throne and strutted proudly about the room. "I've got a right to cackle, I guess," replied Billina. "I've just laid my egg." "What, laid an egg in my throne room? How dare you do such a thing?" asked the king in a voice of fury. "I lay eggs whenever I happen to be," said the hen, ruffling her feathers and then shaking them into place. "But thunderation! Don't you know that eggs are poison?" roared the king while his rock-colored eyes stuck out in great terror. "Poison? Well, I declare," said Billina indignantly. "I'll have you know all my eggs are warranted strictly fresh and up-to-date. Poison, indeed." "You don't understand," retorted the little monarch nervously. "Eggs belong only to the outside world, to the world on the earth's surface, where you come from. Here, in my underground kingdom, they are rank poison, as I said, and we gnomes can't bear them around." "Well, you'll have to bear this one around," declared Billina, "for I've laid it." "Where?" asked the king. "Under your throne," said the hen. The king jumped 3 feet into the air, so anxious was he to get away from that throne. Take it away at once," he shouted. "I can't," said Billina. "I haven't any hands." "I'll take the egg," said the Scarecrow. "I'm making a collection of Billina's eggs. There's one in my pocket now that she laid yesterday." Hearing this, the monarch hastened to put a good distance between himself and the Scarecrow, who was about to reach under the throne for the egg when the hen suddenly cried, "Stop!" "What's wrong?" asked the Scarecrow. "Don't take the egg unless the king will allow me to enter the palace and guess as the others have done," said Billina. "Pshaw," returned the king. "You're only a hen. How could you guess my enchantments?" "I can try, I suppose," said Billina, "and if I fail, you will have another ornament." "A pretty ornament you'd make, wouldn't you?" growled the king. "But you shall have your way. It will properly punish you for daring to lay an egg in my presence. After the Scarecrow is enchanted, you shall follow him into the palace. But how will you touch the objects?" "With my claws," said the hen, "and I can speak the word Ev as plainly as anyone, so I must have the right to guess at the enchantments of my friends, and to release them if I succeed." "Very well," said the king. "You have my promise. Then," said Billina to the Scarecrow, "you may get the egg." He knelt down and reached under underneath the throne and found the egg, which he placed in another pocket of his jacket, fearing that if both eggs were in one pocket, they would knock together and get broken. Just then a bell above the throne rang briskly, and the king gave another nervous jump. "Well, well," he said with a rueful face, "the girl has actually done it." "Done what?" asked the Scarecrow. "She has made one guess that is right, and broken one of my neatest enchantments. By rickety, that's too bad. I never thought she would do it." "Do I understand that she will now return to us in safety?" inquired the Scarecrow joyfully, wrinkling his painted face into a broad smile. "Of course," said the king, fretfully, pacing up and down the room. "I always keep my promises, no matter how foolish they are. But I shall make an ornament of the yellow hen to replace the one I have just lost." "Perhaps you will, and perhaps you won't," murmured Billina calmly. "I may surprise you by guessing right." "Guessing right?" snapped the king. "How could you guess right when your betters have failed, you stupid fowl?" Billina did not care to answer this question, and a moment later the doors flew open and Dorothy entered, leading the little Prince Evering by the hand. The Scarecrow welcomed the girl with a close embrace, and he would have embraced Evering too in his delight, but the little prince was shy and shrank away from the painted Scarecrow because he did not know his many excellent qualities. But there was little time for the friends to talk because the Scarecrow must now enter the palace. Dorothy's success had greatly encouraged him, and they both hoped he would manage to make at least one correct guess. However, he proved as unfortunate as the others except Dorothy. and although he took a good deal of time to select his objects, not one did the poor scarecrow guess right. So he became a solid gold card receiver, and the beautiful but terrible palace awaited its next visitor. "It's all over," remarked the king with a sigh of satisfaction, "and it has been a very amusing performance, except for the one good guess the Kansas girl made. I am richer by a great many pretty ornaments." "It's my turn now," said Billina briskly. "Oh, I'd forgotten you," said the king. "But you needn't go if you don't wish to. I will be generous and let you off." "No, you won't," replied the hen. "I insist upon having my guesses as you promised." "Then go ahead, you absurd feathered fool," grumbled the king, and he caused the opening that led to the palace to appear once more. "Don't go, Billina," said Dorothy earnestly. "It isn't easy to guess those ornaments, and only luck saved me from being one myself. Stay with me, and we'll go back to the land of Ev together. I'm sure this little prince will give us a home." "Indeed I will," said Evering with much dignity. "Don't worry, my dear," cried Billina, with a cluck that was meant for a laugh. "I may not be human, but I am no fool, if I am a chicken." "Oh, Billina," said Dorothy, "you haven't been a chicken in a long time, not since you've been grown up." "Perhaps that's true," answered Billina thoughtfully. "But if a Kansas farmer sold me to someone, what would he call me? A hen or a chicken?" "You are not a Kansas farmer, Billina," replied the girl. "And you said—" "Never mind that, Dorothy. I'm going. I won't say goodbye, because I'm coming back. Keep up your courage, for I'll see you a little later." Then Billina gave several loud cluck-clucks that seemed to make the fat little king more nervous than ever, and marched through the entrance into the enchanted palace. "I hope I've seen the last of that bird," declared the monarch, seating himself again in his throne and mopping the perspiration from his forehead with his rock-colored handkerchief. "Hens are bothersome enough at their best, but when they can talk, they're simply dreadful." "Billina's my friend," said Dorothy quietly. "She may not always be exactly polite, but she means well, I'm sure." Excellent. That's the end of the first chapter. So it seems Billina tricked the king. Let her go in. Billina knows all the secrets of the colors, which is why the next chapter is titled Purple, Green, and Gold. Purple, Green, and Gold. The yellow hen, stepping high and with the air of vast importance, walked slowly over the rich velvet carpets of the splendid palace, examining everything she met with her sharp little eyes. Billina had a right to feel important, for she alone shared the Gnome King's secret and knew how to tell the objects that were transformations from those that had never been alive. She was very sure that her guesses would be correct, but before she began to make them, she was curious to behold all the magnificence of this underground palace, which was perhaps one of the most splendid and beautiful places in any fairyland. As she went through the room, she counted the purple ornaments, and although some were small and hidden in queer places, Billina spied them all, and found the entire 10 scattered about the various rooms. The green ornaments she did not bother to count, for she thought she could find them all when the time came. Finally, having made a survey of the entire palace and enjoyed its splendor, the yellow hen returned to one of the rooms where she had noticed a large purple footstool. She placed a claw upon it and said, "Ev," and at once the footstool vanished, and a lovely lady, tall and slender, and most beautifully robed, stood before her. The lady's eyes were round with astonishment for a moment, for she could not remember her transformation, nor imagine what had restored her to life. "Good morning, ma'am," said Billina in her sharp voice. "You're looking quite well, considering your age." "Who speaks?" demanded the Queen of Ev, drawing herself up proudly. "Why, my name is Bill, by rights," answered the hen, who was now perched upon the back of a chair. "Although Dorothy has put scallops on it and made it Billina, but the name doesn't matter. I've saved you from the Gnome King, and you are a slave no longer." "Then I thank you for your gracious favor," said the queen, with a graceful curtsy. "But my children, tell me, I beg you, where are my children?" And she clasped her hands in anxious entreaty. "Don't worry," advised Bellina, pecking at the tiny bug that was crawling over the chair back. "Just at present, they are out of mischief and perfectly safe, for they can't even wiggle." "What mean you, O kindly stranger?" asked the queen, striving to repress her anxiety. "They're enchanted," said Bellina, "just as you have been. All, that is, except the little fellow Dorothy picked out, and the chances are that they have been good boys and girls for some time, because they couldn't help it." "Oh, my poor darlings!" cried the queen, with a sob of anguish. "Not at all," returned the hen. "Don't let their condition make you unhappy, ma'am, because I'll soon have them crowding round to bother and worry you as naturally as ever. Come with me, if you please, and I'll show you how pretty they look." She flew down from her perch and walked into the next room, the queen following. As she passed a low table, a small green grasshopper caught her eye, and instantly Bellina pounced on it, and snapped it up in her sharp bill. For grasshoppers are favorite food with hens, and they usually must be caught quickly before they can hop away. That might easily have been the end of Ozma of Oz, had she been a real grasshopper instead of an emerald one. But Bellina found the grasshopper hard and lifeless, and suspecting it was not good to eat, she quickly dropped it, instead of letting it slide down her throat. "I might have known better," she muttered to herself, "for where there's no grass, there can live no grasshoppers. This is probably one of the king's transformations." A moment later she approached one of the purple ornaments, and while the queen watched her curiously, the hen broke the Gnome King's enchantment, and a sweet-faced girl, whose gold hair fell in a cloud over her shoulder, stood beside them. "Ivana!" cried the queen. "My own Ivana!" And she clasped the girl to her bosom and covered her face with kisses. "That's all right," said Bellina, contentedly. "I am a good guesser, Mr. Gnome King. Well, I guess." Then she disenchanted another girl, whom the queen addressed as Evrose, and afterwards a boy named Evardo, who was older than his brother Evering, indeed. The yellow hen kept the good queen exclaiming and embracing for some time, until 5 princesses and 4 princes, all looking very much alike except for the difference in size, now stood in a row beside their happy mother. The princesses were named Ivana, Evrose, Evella, Everine, and Evadina, while the princes were Everob, Evington, Evardo, and Everland. Of these, Evardo was the eldest and would inherit his father's throne and be crowned King of Ev when he returned to his own country. He was a grave and quiet youth, and would doubtless rule his people wisely and with justice. Bellina, having restored all of the royal family of Ev to their proper forms, now began to select the green ornaments, which were the transformations of the people of Oz. She had little trouble finding these, and before long all 26 officers, as well as the private, were gathered around the yellow hen, joyfully congratulating her upon their release. The 37 people who were now alive in the rooms of the palace knew very well that they owed their freedom to the cleverness of the yellow hen, and they were earnest in thanking her for saving them from the magic of the Gnome King. "Now," said Bellina, "I must find Ozma. She is sure to be here somewhere, and of course she is green, being from Oz, so look around, you stupid soldiers, and help me in my search." For a while, however, they could discover nothing more that was green, but the queen, who had kissed all of her 9 children once more, and could now find time to take an interest of what was going on, said to the hen, "Mayhap, my gentle friend, it is the grasshopper whom you seek." "Of course it's the grasshopper!" exclaimed Bellina. "I declare, I'm nearly as stupid as these brave soldiers. Wait here for me, and I'll go back and get it." So she went into the room where she had seen the grasshopper, and presently Ozma of Oz, as lovely and dainty as ever, entered and approached the Queen of Ev, greeting her as one high-born princess greets another. "But where are my friends, the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman?" asked the girl ruler, when these courtesies had been exchanged. I'll hunt them up, replied Bellina. The Scarecrow is solid gold, and so is Tick-Tock. But I don't exactly know what the Tin Woodman is, because the Gnome King said he had been transformed into something funny. Ozma eagerly assisted the hen in her quest, and soon the Scarecrow and the Machine Man, being ornaments of shining gold, were discovered and restored to their accustomed forms. But, search as they might, in no place they could find a funny ornament that might be the transformation of the Tin Woodman. Only one thing can be done, said Ozma at last, and that is to return to the Gnome King and oblige him to tell us what has become of our friend. Perhaps he won't, suggested Bellina. He must, returned Ozma firmly. The king has not treated us honestly, for under the mask of fairness and good nature he entrapped us all, and we would have been forever enchanted had not our wise and clever friend the Yellow Hen found a way to save us. The king is a villain, declared the Scarecrow. His laugh is worse than another man's frown, said the private with a shudder. I thought he was honest, but I was mistaken, remarked Tick-Tock. My thoughts are usually correct, but it is Smith and Tinker's fault if they sometimes go wrong or do not work properly. Smith and Tinker made a very good job of you, said Ozma kindly. I do not think they should be blamed if you are not quite perfect. Thank you, replied Tick-Tock. Then, said Bellina in her brisk little voice, let us all go back to the Gnome King and see what he has to say for himself. So they started for the entrance, Ozma going first, with the queen and her train of little princes and princesses following. Then came Tick-Tock and the Scarecrow, with Bellina perched upon his straw-stuffed shoulder. The 27 officers and the private brought up the rear. As they reached the hall, the doors flew open before them, and then they all stopped and stared into the domed cavern with faces of astonishment and dismay. For the room was filled with mail-clad warriors of the Gnome King, rank after rank, standing in orderly array. The electric lights upon their brows gleamed brightly. Their battle-axes were poised as if to strike down their foes, yet they remained motionless as statues, awaiting a word of command. And in the center of this terrible army sat the little king upon his throne of rock. But he neither smiled nor laughed. Instead, his face was distorted with rage, and most dreadful to behold. Hey, Leanne, how's it going? Stafford, what's up? Heavy D, welcome. The Rock. Appreciate you popping by and saying hey. How's everybody doing this Monday? That was an insane chapter. I think the Gnome King is mad. That hen went in and took all of his ornaments. But Nick Chopper is still in there, and I don't think he's going to be helping him out with where he is. I think we might have to say goodbye to Mr. Nick Chopper. But good morning, Haley, and I hope you're doing well. Now I'll get comfortable. I like that. Get comfy. Listening while I work, and that is quite alright. I hope you enjoy. And I appreciate you being here. I'm really excited to see what the Gnome King is going to do. Darker Bunnies, how's it going, man? It's going well. Just relaxing and reading on this fine Monday. We're about to start chapter number 17. The Scarecrow wins the fight, so that sounds pretty cool. But yeah, we're going to finish this book tonight and start the next book next week. So I appreciate you popping out. Put it on YouTube. Oh man, that's amazing. I love that, Stafford, and appreciate you so much. I'm happy to inform y'all I have officially passed that 2400 mark, so I have 600 hours left in my my watch hour goal. So I appreciate all the time and hanging out. Like, it's definitely fun. I know you all don't hang out to give me the watch hours, but I appreciate you being here. Alright, let's get into it. 12 likes. You guys are great. But we're going to get into Chapter 17, The Scarecrow Wins the Fight. And that's what I like to hear. After Bellina had entered the palace, Dorothy and Evering sat down to await the success or failure of her mission, and the Gnome King occupied his throne and smoked his long pipe for a while in cheerful and contented mood. Then the bell above his throne, which sounded whenever an enchantment was broken, began to ring, and the king gave a start of annoyance and exclaimed, "Rockety rickets!" When the bell rang a second time, the king shouted angrily, "Smudge and blazes!" And at the third ring he screamed in a fury, "Hippocalordic!" Which must be a dreadful word because we didn't know what it meant. After that, the bell went on ringing time after time, but the king was now so violently enraged that he could not utter a word, but hopped out of his throne and all around the room in a mad frenzy, so that he reminded Dorothy of a jumping jack. The girl was, for her part, filled with joy at every plea of the bell, for it announced the fact that Bellina had transformed one more ornament into a living person. Dorothy was also amazed at Bellina's success, for she could not imagine how the yellow hen was able to guess correctly from all the bewildering number of articles clustered in the rooms of the palace. But after she counted 10 and the bell continued to ring, she knew that not only the royal family of Ev, but Ozma and her followers also were being restored to their natural forms, and she was so delighted that the antics of the angry king only made her laugh merrily. Perhaps the little monarch could not be more furious than he was before, but the little girl's laughter nearly drove him frantic, and he roared at her like a savage beast. Then, as he found that all his enchantments were likely to be dispelled, and his victims every one set free, he suddenly ran into a little door that opened upon the balcony and gave a shrill whistle that summoned his warriors. At once the army filed out of the gold and silver doors and in great numbers, and marched up to the winding stairs and into the throne room, led by a stern-featured gnome who was their captain. When they had nearly filled the throne room, they formed ranks in a big underground cavern below, and then stood still until they were told what to do next. Dorothy had pressed back to one side of the cavern when the warriors entered, and now she stood holding the little Prince Evering's hand, while the great lion crouched upon one side of the enormous tiger crouched on the other. "Seize that girl!" shouted the king to his captain, and a group of warriors sprang forward to obey. But both the lion and tiger snarled so fiercely and bared their strong, sharp teeth so threateningly that the men drew back in alarm. "Don't mind them," cried the Gnome King. "They cannot leap beyond the places where they are now standing." "But they can bite those who attempt to touch the girl," said the captain. "I'll fix that," answered the king. "I'll enchant them again, so they can't open their jaws." He stepped out of the throne to do this, but just then the sawhorse ran up behind him and gave the fat monarch a powerful kick with both his wooden hind legs. "Ow! Murder! Treason!" cried the king, who had been hurled against several of his warriors and was considerably bruised. "Who did that?" "I did," growled the sawhorse viciously. "You let Dorothy alone or I'll kick you again." "We'll see about that," replied the king, and at once he waved his hand toward the sawhorse and muttered a magical word. "Aha!" he continued. "Now let us see you move, you wooden mule." But in spite of the magic, the sawhorse moved, and he moved so quickly towards the king that the fat little man could not get out of the way. Thump! Bang! Came the wooden heels right against his round body, and the king flew into the air and fell upon the head of his captain, who let him drop flat upon the ground. "Well, well," said the king, sitting up and looking surprised. "Why didn't my magic belt work, I wonder?" "This creature is made of wood," replied the captain. "Your magic will not work on wood, you know." "Ah, I'd forgotten that," said the king, getting up and limping to his throne. "Very well, let the girl alone. She can't escape us anyway." The warriors, who had been rather confused by these incidents, now formed their ranks again, and the sawhorse pranced across the room to Dorothy and took a position beside the hungry tiger. At that moment, the doors that led to the palace flew open, and the people of Ev and the people of Oz were disclosed to view. They paused, astonished at the sight of the warriors, and the angry Gnome King seated in their midst. "Surrender!" cried the king in a loud voice. "You are my prisoners." "Go along," answered Bellina from the Scarecrow's shoulder. "You promised me that if I guessed correctly, my friends and I may depart in safety, and you always keep your promises." "I said you might leave the palace in safety," retorted the king, "and so you may, but you cannot leave my dominions. You are my prisoners, and I will hurl you all into my underground dungeons where the volcanic fires glow and the molten lava flows in every direction, and the air is hotter than blue blazes." "That will be the end of me, all right," said the Scarecrow sorrowfully. "One small blaze, blue or green, is enough to reduce me to ash heap." "Do you surrender?" demanded the king. Bellina whispered something in the Scarecrow's ear that made him smile and put his hands in his jacket pockets. "No," returned Ozma, boldly answering the king. Then she said to her army, "Forward, my brave soldiers, and fight for your ruler and yourselves unto death." "Pardon me, most royal Ozma," replied one of her generals, "but I find that I and my brother officers all suffer from heart disease, and the slightest excitement will kill us. If we fight, we may get excited. Would it not be well for us to avoid this grave danger?" "Soldiers should not have heart disease," said Ozma. "Private soldiers are not, I believe, affected that way," declared another general, whirling his mustache thoughtfully. "If your Royal Highness desires, we will order our private to attack yonder warriors." "Do so," replied Ozma. "Forward, march!" cried all the generals with one voice. "Forward, march!" yelled the colonels. "Forward, march!" shouted the majors. "Forward, march!" commanded the captains. And at that, the private leveled his spear and dashed furiously upon the foe. The captain of the gnomes was so surprised by this sudden onslaught that he forgot to command his warriors to fight, so that 10 men in the first row who stood in front of the private's spear fell over like so many toy soldiers. The spear could not go through their steel armor, however, so the soldiers scrambled to their feet again, and by the time the private had knocked over another row of them. Then the captain brought down his battle axe with such a strong blow that the private's spear was shattered and knocked from his grasp, and he was helpless to fight any longer. The Gnome King had left his throne and pressed through his warriors to the front rank so he could see what was going on. But as he faced Ozma and her friends, the Scarecrow, as if aroused to action by the valor of the private, drew one of Bellina's eggs from his right jacket pocket and hurled it straight at the little monarch's head. It struck him squarely in his left eye, where the egg smashed and shattered, as eggs will, and covered his face and hair and beard with its sticky contents. "Help! Help!" screamed the king, clawing with his fingers at the egg in a struggle to remove it. "An egg! An egg! Run for your lives!" shouted the captain of the gnomes in a voice of horror. And how they did run! The warriors fairly tumbled over one another and their efforts to escape the fatal poison of that awful egg. And those who could not rush down the dwindling stair fell off the balcony into the great cavern beneath, knocking over those who stood below them. Even while the king was still yelling for help, his throne room became emptied of every one of his warriors, and before the monarch had managed to clear the egg away from his left eye, the Scarecrow threw the second egg against his right eye, where it smashed and blinded him entirely. The king was unable to flee because he could not see which way to run, so he stood still and howled and shouted and screamed in abject fear. While this was going on, Bellina flew over to Dorothy and perching herself upon the lion's back, the hen whispered eagerly to the girl, "Get his belt. Get the Gnome King's jeweled belt. It unbuckles in the back. Quick, Dorothy, quick." Whew. Lori! What's up, boo? I hope you're doing well. That was insane. Who would have thought? Eggs. I think I've had a rough day. My eyes are not working the way they should. Good to see you. Hey, it's good to see you. We're just about to get into chapter number 18. Ooh, the fate of the Tin Woodman. I was just talking about that. But I hope you had a good day overall. See about maybe refilling my coffee real quick. Yeah, let me do that, and then we'll get into the last few chapters here. But super appreciate y'all spending time with me tonight. As always. Happy to be here. Already coming in and stealing that number one spot. No, I appreciate you. Let's see what happened to our buddy Nick Chopper. Fate of the Tin Woodman, chapter 18. Whew, Dorothy obeyed. She ran at once behind the Gnome King, who was still trying to free his eyes from the egg. And in a twinkling, she had unbuckled his splendid jeweled belt and carried it away with her to her place beside the tiger and the lion, where, because she did not know what else to do with it, she fastened it around her own slim waist. Just then, the chief steward rushed in with a sponge and a bowl of water and began mopping away the broken eggs from his master's face. In a few minutes, and while all the party stood looking on, the king regained the use of his eyes, and the first thing he did was to glare wickedly upon the scarecrow and exclaim, "I'll make you suffer for this, you hay-stuffed dummy! Don't you know eggs are poison to gnomes?" "Really?" said the scarecrow. "They don't seem to agree with you, although I wonder why." "They were strictly fresh and above suspicion," said Bellina. "You ought to be glad to get them." "I'll transform you all into scorpions," cried the king angrily, and began waving his arms and muttering magic words. But none of the people became scorpions, so the king stopped and looked at them in surprise. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Why, you're not wearing your magic belt," replied the chief steward, after looking the king over carefully. "Where is it? What have you done with it?" The Gnome King clapped his hands to his waist, and his rock-colored face turned white as chalk. "It's gone," he cried helplessly. "It's gone, and I'm ruined." Dorothy now stepped forward and said, "Royal Ozma, and you, Queen of Ev, I welcome you and your people back to the land of the living. Bellina has saved you from your troubles, and now we will leave this dreadful place and return to Ev as soon as possible." While the child spoke, they could all see that she wore the magic belt, and a great cheer went up from all her friends, which was led by the voices of the Scarecrow and the Private. But the Gnome King did not join them. He crept back into his throne like a whipped dog and lay there bitterly bemoaning his defeat. "But we have not yet found my faithful follower, the Tin Woodman," said Ozma to Dorothy, "and without him I do not wish to go away." "Nor I," replied Dorothy quickly. "Wasn't he in the palace?" "He must be there," said Bellina, "but I had no clue to guide me in guessing the Tin Woodman, so I must have missed him." "We will go back into the room," said Dorothy. "This magic belt, I am sure, will help us find our dear old friend." So she re-entered the palace, the doors of which still stood open, and everyone followed her except the Gnome King, the Queen of Ev, and Prince Evering. The mother had taken the little prince in her lap and was fondly fondling and kissing him lovingly, for he was her youngest born. But the others went with Dorothy, and when she came to the middle of the first room, the girl waved her hand, and as she had seen the king do, he commanded the Tin Woodman, whatever form he might be then, to resume his proper shape. No result followed this attempt, so Dorothy went into another room and repeated it, and so through all the rooms of the palace. Yet the Tin Woodman did not appear to them, nor could they imagine what among the thousands of ornaments was their transformed friend. Sadly, they returned to the throne room, where the king, seeing that they had met with failure, jeered at Dorothy, saying, "You do not know how to use my belt, so it is of no use to you. Give it back to me, and I will let you go free, you and all the people who came with you. As for the royal family of Ev, they are my slaves and shall remain here." "I shall keep the belt," said Dorothy. "But how can you escape without my consent?" asked the king. "Easily enough," answered the girl. "All we need to do is walk out the way that we came in." "Oh, that's all, is it?" sneered the king. "Well, where is the passage through which you entered this room?" They all looked around, but could not discover the place, for it had long been since closed. Dorothy, however, would not be dismayed. She waved her hand toward the seemingly solid wall of the cavern and said, "I command the passage to open." Instantly the order was obeyed, and the opening appeared, and the passage lay plainly before them. The king was amazed, and all the others overjoyed. "Why, then, if the belt obeys you, were you unable to discover the Tin Woodman?" asked Ozma. "I can't imagine," said Dorothy. "See here, girl," proposed the king, eagerly. "Give me the belt, and I will tell you what shape the Tin Woodman was changed into, and then you can easily find him." Dorothy hesitated, but Billina cried out, "Don't you do it! If the Gnome King gets the belt again, he will make every one of us prisoners, for we will be in his power. Only by keeping the belt, Dorothy, will you ever be able to leave this place in safety." "I think that is true," said the Scarecrow, "but I have another idea, due to my excellent brains. Let Dorothy transform the king into a goose egg, unless he agrees to go into the palace and bring us out the ornament, which is our friend Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodman." "A goose egg?" echoed the horrified king. "How dreadful!" "Well, a goose egg you will be, unless you go fetch us the ornament we want," declared Billina, with a joyful chuckle. "You can see for yourself that Dorothy is able to use a magic belt all right," added the Scarecrow. The Gnome King thought it over and finally consented, for he did not want to be a goose egg. So he went into the palace to get the ornament, which was the transformation of the Tin Woodman, and they all awaited his return with considerable impatience, for they were anxious to leave this underground cavern and see the sunshine once more. But when the Gnome King came back, he brought nothing with him except a puzzled and anxious expression upon his face. "He's gone," he said. "The Tin Woodman is nowhere in the palace." "Are you sure?" asked Ozma sternly. "I'm very sure," answered the king, trembling, "for I knew just what I transformed him into and exactly where he stood, but he is not there. And please don't change me into a goose egg, because I've done the best I could." They were all silent for a time, and then Dorothy said, "There's no use punishing the Gnome King anymore, and I'm afraid we'll have to go away without our friend." "If he is not here, we cannot rescue him," agreed the Scarecrow sadly. "Poor Nick. I wonder what's become of him." "And he owed me 6 weeks' back pay," said one of the generals, wiping the tears from his eyes with the golden laced coat sleeve. Very sorrowfully, they determined to return to the upper world without their former companion. And so Ozma gave the order to begin the march through the passage. The army went first, and then the royal family of Ev, and afterward came Dorothy, Ozma, Billina, the Scarecrow, and Tik-Tok. They left the Gnome King scowling at them from his throne, and had no thought of danger until Ozma chanced to look back and saw a large number of warriors following them in full chase, with their swords and spears and axes raised to strike down the fugitives as soon as they drew near enough. Evidently, the Gnome King had made his last attempt to prevent their escaping him, but it did him no good, for when Dorothy saw the danger they were in, she stopped and waved her hand and whispered a command into the magic belt. Instantly, the foremost warriors became eggs, which rolled upon the floor of the cavern in such numbers that those behind could not advance without stepping upon them. But when they saw the eggs, all desire to advance departed from them, and the warriors turned and fled madly into the cavern, and refused to go back again. Our friends had no further trouble in reaching the end of the passage, and soon were standing in the outer air upon the gloomy path between the two high mountains. But the way to Ev lay plainly before them, and they fervently hoped that they had seen the last of the Gnome King in his dreadful palace. The cavalcade was led by Ozma, mounted on the Cowardly Lion, and the Queen of Ev, who rode upon the back of the tiger. The children of the Queen walked behind her hand in hand. Dorothy rode the Sawhorse, while the Scarecrow walked and commanded the army in the absence of the Tin Woodman. Presently, the way began to lighten and more of the sunshine to come in between the two mountains, and before long they heard the thump, thump, thump of the giant's hammer upon the road. "How may we pass the monstrous man of iron?" asked the Queen, anxiously for the safety of her children. But Dorothy solved that problem by a word to the magic belt. The giant paused with his hammer held motionless in the air, thus allowing the entire party to pass between his cast iron legs in safety. Mission accomplished. Except the Tin Woodman. Now I'm curious. Anybody have any word on what the Tin Woodman might be, or where he may have gone? Very curious. Very curious indeed. Alright. What's everybody drinking, if anything? Coffee? Tea? Pillow? Alright, chapter 19. The King of Ev. If there were any shifting, rock-colored gnomes on the mountainside now, they were silent and respectful, for our adventurers were not annoyed, as before, by their impudent laughter. Really, the gnomes had nothing to laugh at since the defeat of their king. On the other side, they found Ozma's golden chariot, standing as they had left it. Soon, the lion and tiger were harnessed to the beautiful chariot, in which was enough room for Ozma and the Queen and 6 of the royal children. Little Evering preferred to ride with Dorothy upon the Sawhorse, which had a long back. The prince had recovered from his shyness and had become very fond of the girl who had rescued him. So they were fast friends and chatted pleasantly together as they rode along. Bellina was also perched upon the head of the wooden steed, which seemed not to mind the added weight in the least, and the boy was full of wonder that the hen could talk and say such sensible things. When they came to the Gulf, Ozma's magic carpet carried them all over in safety, and now they began to pass the trees in which birds were singing, and the breeze that was wafted to them from the farms of Ev was spicy with flowers and new-mown hay, and the sunshine fell full upon them, to warm them and drive away from their bodies the chill and dampness of the underground kingdom of the gnomes. "I would be quite content," said the Scarecrow to Tick-Tock, "were only the Tin Woodman with us, but it breaks my heart to leave him behind." "He was a fine fellow," replied Tick-Tock, "although his material was not very durable." "Oh, tin is an excellent material," the Scarecrow hastened to say, "and if anything ever happened to poor Nick Chopper, he was always easily soldered. Besides, he did not have to be wound up and was not liable to get out of order." "I sometimes wish," said Tick-Tock, "that I was stuffed with straw as you are. It is hard to be made of copper." "I have no reason to complain, my lot," replied the Scarecrow. "A little fresh straw now and then makes me as good as new, but I can never be the polished gentleman that my poor departed friend, the Tin Woodman, was." You may be sure the royal children of Ev and their queen mother were delighted at seeing again their beloved country, and when the towers of the palace of Ev came into view, they could not forbear cheering at the sight. Little Evering, riding in front of Dorothy, was so overjoyed that he took a curious tin whistle from his pocket and blew a shrill blast that made the sawhorse leap and prance in sudden alarm. "What is that?" asked Billina, who had been obliged to flutter her wings in order to keep her seat upon the head of the frightened sawhorse. "That's my whistle," said Prince Evering, holding it out upon his hand. It was in the shape of a little fat pig, made of tin and painted green. The whistle was in the tail of the pig. "Where did you get it?" asked the yellow hen, closely examining the toy with her bright eyes. "Why, I picked it up in the Gnome King's palace." While Dorothy was making her guesses, and I put it in my pocket, answered the little prince. Billina laughed, or at least she made the peculiar cackle that served her for a laugh. "No wonder I couldn't find the Tin Woodman," she said, "and no wonder the magic belt didn't make him appear, for the king couldn't find him either." "What do you mean?" questioned Dorothy. "Why, the prince had him in his pocket," cried Billina, cackling again. "I did not," protested little Evering. "I only took the whistle." "Well then, watch me," returned the hen. Reaching out her claw, she touched the whistle and said, "Ev." Swish! "Good afternoon," said the Tin Woodman, taking off his funnel cap and bowing to Dorothy and the prince. "I think I must have been asleep for the first time since I was made of tin, for I do not remember our leaving the Gnome King." "You have been enchanted," answered the girl, throwing an arm over her old friend and hugging him tight in her joy. "But it is all right now." "I want my whistle," said the little prince, beginning to cry. "Hush," cautioned Billina. "The whistle is lost, but you may have another when you get home." The Scarecrow had fairly thrown himself upon the bosom of his old comrade, so surprised and delighted was he to see him again, and Tick-Tock squeezed the Tin Woodman's hand so earnestly that he dented some of his fingers. Then they had to make way for Ozma to welcome the Tin Woodman, and the army caught sight of him and set up a cheer, and everyone was delighted and happy. For the Tin Woodman was a great favorite with all those who knew him, and his sudden recovery after they had thought he was lost to them forever was indeed a pleasant surprise. Before long the cavalcade arrived at the royal palace, where the great crowd of people had gathered to welcome their queen and her 10 children. There was much shouting and cheering, and the people threw flowers in their path, and every face wore a happy smile. They found the Princess Langwidere in the mirrored chamber, where she was admiring one of her handsomest heads, one with rich chestnut hair, dreamy walnut eyes, and a shapely hickory nut nose. She was very glad to be relieved of her duties of the people of Ev, and the queen graciously permitted her to return her rooms and her cabinet of heads as long as she lived. Retain. It's a little odd. Then the queen took her eldest son out upon the balcony that overlooked the crowd, the subjects gathered below, and said to them, "Here is your future ruler, King Everardo, 15th. He is 15 years of age, has 15 silver buckles on his jacket, and is the 15th Everardo to rule the land of Ev." The people shouted their approval 15 times, and even the Wheelers, some of whom were present, loudly promised to obey the king. So the queen placed a big crown of gold set with rubies upon Everardo's head, and threw an emerine robe over his shoulders, and proclaimed him king. And he bowed gratefully to all his subjects, and then went away to see if he could find any cake in the royal pantry. Ozma of Oz and her people, as well as Dorothy, Tick-Tock, and Billina, all splendidly entertained by the Queen Mother, who owed all her happiness to their kind offices. And that evening the Yellow Hen was publicly presented with a beautiful necklace of pearls and sapphires as the token of esteem from the new king. Hey, Aunt. Popping in here. Send the love before I go back to bed. No worries, Aunt. Appreciate that. Hope you sleep well. Yeah, we're powering through this, y'all. Unless these last 2 chapters are really long, this might be a shorter stream than most. I'm really happy they found Nick Chopper. I think it's funny they smuggled him out. Didn't even know it. And to be turned into a funny pig whistle. But why turn him into an emerald? I guess he was from Oz, but still. All right. Is Chopper also the One Piece deer thing? Ooh. Yes, it is. Tony Chopper. Tony Chopper. This is Nick Chopper, but yes, you're right. That is the character from One Piece. And a favorite amongst the fans. Alright, last two chapters here. We're going to get into chapter 20, the Emerald City. Going back to the Emerald City. Which we had quite the adventure in the Emerald City in the last book. Dorothy decided to accept Ozma's invitation to return with her to the land of Oz. There was no greater chance of her getting home from Ev than from Oz, and the little girl was anxious to see once more the country where she had encountered such wonderful adventures. By this time, Uncle Henry would have reached Australia in his ship, and had probably given her up for lost, so he couldn't worry any more than he did if she stayed away from him a little while longer. So she would go to Oz. They bade goodbye to the people from Ev, and the king promised Ozma that he would ever be grateful to her and render the land of Oz any service that might lie within his power. And then they approached the edge of the dangerous desert, and Ozma threw down the magic carpet, which at once unrolled far enough for all of them to walk upon it without being crowded. Tik-Tok, claiming to be Dorothy's faithful follower because he belonged to her and had permitted to join the party, and before they started, the girl wound up his machinery as far as possible, and the copper man stepped off as briskly as any one of them. Ozma also invited Billina to visit the land of Oz, and the Yellow Hen was glad enough to go where new sights and new scenes awaited her. They began the trip across the desert early in the morning, and as they stopped only long enough for Billina to lay her daily egg, before the sun set, they espied the green slopes and wooden hills of the beautiful land of Oz. They entered it in the Munchkin territory, and the king of the Munchkins met them at the border and welcomed Ozma with great respect, being very pleased by her safe return. For Ozma of Oz ruled the kingdom of the Munchkins, and the king of the Winkies, the king of the Quadlings, and the king of the Gillikins, just as those kings ruled their own people. And this supreme ruler of the land of Oz lived in a great town of her own called the Emerald City, which was in the exact center of the four kingdoms of the land of Oz. The Munchkin King entertained them at his palace that night, and in the morning they set out for the Emerald City, traveling over a road of yellow brick that led straight to the jeweled-studded gates. Everywhere the people turned out to greet their beloved Ozma and to hail joyfully the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion, who were popular favorites. Dorothy, too, remembered some of the people who had befriended her on the occasion of her first visit to Oz, and they were well pleased to see the little Kansas girl again, and showered her with compliments and good wishes. At one place, where they stopped to refresh themselves, Ozma accepted a bowl of milk from the hands of a pretty dairymaid. Then she looked at the girl more closely and exclaimed, "Why, it's Ginger, isn't it?" "Yes, Your Highness," was the reply, as Ginger dropped a low curtsy, and Dorothy looked wonderingly at this lively-appearing person, who had once assembled an army of women and driven the Scarecrow from the throne of the Emerald City, and even fought a battle with powerful army of Glinda the Sorceress. "I've married a man who owns 9 cows," said Ginger to Ozma, "and now I am happy and contented and willing to lead a quiet life and mind my own business." "Where's your husband?" asked Ozma. "He is in the house, nursing a black eye," replied Ginger calmly. "The foolish man would insist upon milking the red cow, and I wanted him to milk the white cow. But he will know better next time, I'm sure." Then the party moved on again, and after crossing a broad river on a ferry and passing many fine farmhouses that were dome-shaped and painted pretty green color, they came in sight of a large building that was covered with flags and bunting. "I don't remember that building," said Dorothy. "What is it?" "That is the College of Art and Athletic Perfection," replied Ozma. I had it built quite recently, and the Wogglebug is its president. It keeps him busy, and the young men who attend the college are no worse off than they were before. You see, in this country are a number of youths who do not like to work, and the college is an excellent place for them. And now they came in sight of the Emerald City, and the people flocked out to greet their loving ruler. There were several bands and many officers and officials of the realm, and the crowd of citizens in their holiday attire. Thus the beautiful Ozma was escorted by a brilliant procession to her royal city. And so great was the cheering that she was obliged to constantly bow to the right and left to acknowledge the greetings of her subjects. That evening there was a grand reception in the royal palace, attended by the most important persons of Oz, and Jack Pumpkinhead, who was a little overripe but still active, read an address congratulating Ozma of Oz upon her success of her generous mission to rescue the royal family of the neighboring kingdom. The magnificent gold medals set with precious stones were presented to each of the 26 officers, and the Tin Woodman was given a new axe studded with diamonds, and the Scarecrow received a silver jar of complexion powder. Dorothy was presented with a pretty coronet and made a Princess of Oz. Tik-Tok received 2 bracelets set with 8 rows of very clear and sparkling emeralds. Afterwards they sat down to a splendid feast, and Ozma put Dorothy at her right and Billina at her left, where the hen sat upon a golden roost and ate from a jeweled platter. Then were placed the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and Tik-Tok, with baskets of lovely flowers before them because they did not require food. The 26 officers were at a lower end of the table, and the Lion and Tiger also had seats, and were served on a golden platter that held a half a bushel at one time. The wealthiest and most important citizens of the Emerald City were proud to wait upon these famous adventurers, and they were assisted by a spryingly little maid named Jellia Jam, whom the Scarecrow perched upon her rosy cheeks and seemed to know her very well. Pinched upon her rosy cheeks. During the feast, Ozma grew thoughtful, and suddenly she asked, "Where's the private?" "Oh, he is sweeping out the barracks," replied one of the generals, who was busy eating a leg of turkey. "But I have ordered him a dish of bread and molasses to eat when his work is done." "Let him be sent for," said the girl ruler. While they waited for this command to be obeyed, she inquired, "Have we any other privates in the armies?" "Oh, yes," replied the Tin Woodman. "I believe there are 3 altogether." The private now entered, saluting his officers and the royal Ozma very respectfully. "What is your name, my man?" asked the girl. "Omby Amby," answered the private. "Then, Omby Amby," she said, "I promote you to be Captain General of all the armies of my kingdom, and especially to be commander of my bodyguard at the royal palace." "It is very expensive to hold so many offices," said the private, hesitating. "I have no moneys to which to buy uniforms." "You shall be supplied from the royal treasury," said Ozma. Then the private was given a seat at the table where the other officers welcomed him cordially, and the feasting and merriment would resume. Suddenly, Jellia Jam exclaimed, "There is nothing more to eat. The hungry tiger has consumed everything." "But that is not the worst of it," declared the tiger mournfully. "Somewhere, somehow, I've actually lost my appetite." I'll know better next time. I'm curious if that's because the cow kicked him or because she punched him. I'm thinking she punched him. Yeah, the hungry tiger lost his appetite. But they're all out of food, too. I don't know, maybe there's some connection with the royal family being gone and his appetite. And now they're back. But he's not from the land of Ev, so I don't know. Cow punch. I wonder what you get for milking a red cow. Strawberry milk? But we are also forgetting that Dorothy, who I'm not sure how she's going to get home again, but she does have the magic belt. Maybe the magic belt is going to help her get home. That would be my guess in the way that I would write it. But I think at this point, Dorothy should just stay in Oz and be a princess. But that's just my 2 cents. That sounds right. Strawberry milk does sound pretty good. Alright, we are on the last chapter already. It is Dorothy's magic belt. Maybe they knew where I was going with that. Ooh. Dorothy passed several very happy weeks in the land of Oz as the guest of the royal Ozma, who was delighted to please the interest the little Kansas girl. Many new acquaintances were formed and many old ones renewed. And wherever she went, Dorothy found herself among friends. One day, however, as she sat in Ozma's private room, she noticed hanging upon the wall a picture which constantly changed in appearance. At one time showing a meadow, and at another time a forest, a lake, or a village. "How curious," she exclaimed after watching the shifting scenes for a few moments. "Yes," said Ozma. "That is really a wonderful invention in magic. If I wish to see any part of the world or any person living, I need only express the wish and it is shown in the picture." "May I use it?" asked Dorothy eagerly. "Of course, my dear." "Then I'd like to see the old Kansas farm and Aunt Em," said the girl. Instantly, the well-remembered farmhouse appeared in the picture, and Aunt Em could be seen quite plainly. She was engaged in washing dishes by the kitchen window and seemed quite well and contented. The hired men and teams were in the harvest fields behind the house, and the corn and wheat seemed to the child to be in prime condition. On the side porch, Dorothy's pet dog, Toto, was lying fast asleep in the sun, and to her surprise, old Speckles was running around with a brood of 12 new chickens trailing after her. "Everything seems all right at home," said Dorothy with a sigh of relief. "Now I wonder what Uncle Henry is doing." The scene in the picture at once shifted to Australia, where, in a pleasant room in Sydney, Uncle Henry was seated in an easy chair, solemnly smoking his briar pipe. He looked sad and lonely, and his hair was now quite white, and his hands and face thin and wasted. "Oh!" cried Dorothy in an anxious voice. "I'm sure Uncle Henry isn't getting any better, and it's because he's worried about me. Ozma, dear, I must go to him at once." "How can you?" asked Ozma. "I don't know," replied Dorothy. "But let us go to Glinda the Good. I'm sure she will help me, and advise me how to get to Uncle Henry." Ozma readily agreed to this plan and caused the sawhorse to be harnessed to a pretty green and pink phaeton, and the two girls rode away to visit the famous sorceress. Glinda received them graciously and listened to Dorothy's story with attention. "I have the magic belt, you know," said the little girl. "If I buckled it around my waist and commanded it to take me to Uncle Henry, wouldn't it do it?" "I think so," replied Glinda with a smile. "And then," continued Dorothy, "if I ever wanted to come back here, the belt would bring me." "In that you are wrong," said the sorceress. "The belt has magical powers only while it is in some fairy country, such as the land of Oz or the land of Ev. Indeed, my little friend, were you to wear it and wish yourself in Australia with your uncle, the wish would doubtless be fulfilled, because it was made in fairyland. But you would not find the magic belt around you when you arrived at your destination." "What would become of it?" asked the girl. "It would be lost, as were your silver shoes when you visited Oz before, and no one would ever see it again. It seems too bad to destroy the use of the magic belt in that way, doesn't it?" "Then," said Dorothy, after a moment's thought, "I will give the magic belt to Ozma, for she can use it in her own country, and she can wish me transported to Uncle Henry without losing the belt." "That is a wise plan," replied Glinda. So they rode back to the Emerald City, and on the way it was arranged that every Saturday morning Ozma would look at Dorothy in her magic picture wherever the little girl might chance to be, and if she saw Dorothy make a certain signal, then Ozma would know the little Kansas girl wanted to revisit the land of Oz. and by means of the Gnome King's magic belt, would wish that she might be instantly returned. This having been agreed upon, Dorothy bade goodbye to all of her friends. Tick-Tock wanted to go to Australia too, but Dorothy knew that the machine man would never do for a servant in a civilized country, and the chances were that his machinery wouldn't work at all, so she left him in Ozma's care. Billina, on the contrary, preferred the land of Oz to any other country and refused to accompany Dorothy. "The bugs and ants that I find here are the finest flavored in the world," declared the Yellow Hen, "and there are plenty of them, so here I shall end my days. And I must say, Dorothy, my dear, that you are very foolish to go back into that stupid humdrum world again." "Uncle Henry needs me," said Dorothy simply, and everyone except Billina thought it was right that she should go. All Dorothy's friends of the land of Oz, both old and new, gathered in a group in front of the palace to bid her a sorrowful goodbye, and to wish her a long life and happiness. After much handshaking, Dorothy kissed Ozma once more, and then handed her the Gnome King's magic belt, saying, "Now, dear princess, when I wave my handkerchief, please wish me with Uncle Henry. I'm awfully sorry to leave you, and the Scarecrow, and the Tin Woodman, and the Cowardly Lion, and Tick-Tock, and everybody. But I do want my Uncle Henry. So goodbye, all of you." Then the little girl stood on one of the big emeralds which decorated the courtyard, and after looking once again at each of her friends, waved her handkerchief. "No," said Dorothy, "I wasn't drowned at all, and I've come to..." Oh, what a weird way to transition. "No," said Dorothy, "I wasn't drowned at all, and I've come to nurse you and take care of you, Uncle Henry, and you must promise to get well as soon as possible." Uncle Henry smiled and cuddled his little niece close in his lap. "I'm better already, my darling," he said. That was a very fast transition. It's almost like there's a page missing where she showed up and he's like, "What? I thought you drowned." "No," said Dorothy, "I wasn't drowned at all." "So sorry that ended so suddenly." Hey, CBC, happy Monday. It's good to see you, fam. But yeah, that is the end of Ozma of Oz. We made it to the end. And I'm sorry it was a lot shorter of a read than normal, about half hour earlier. But while we are here, let's go and see what we are into next. That was an insane book. A couple of things that I like. I like that Dorothy now has a surefire way to get back to Oz anytime she so wishes it. Although it would be kind of tricky to remember every Saturday that if you wanted to go back, you'd have to make a magic symbol at a certain time of day to let her know that you need to come back. But yeah, I thought it was quite a clever story. Very cute. And everybody lived, and all of our friends keep getting more and more muchier. But the next book is just called Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. A faithful record of their amazing adventures in an underground world, and how, with the aid of their friends Zeb Hugson, Eureka the Kitten, and Jim the Cab Horse, they finally reached the wonderful land of Oz. And there's 20 chapters in that one. I might even be able to just split that into 2 reads and do 10 and 10. But as I have gotten into the habit here, that's funny, it's credited by Frank L. Baum, Royal Historian of Oz. That's funny to me. What I will do here, just to fill a little bit more time, is I'm going to get into the next book and just read the To My Readers portion, because Frank L. Baum would also kind of write a preface in the book saying how he came up with this idea, so And they seem to be following the same structure of he just listens to the kids, all of his fans that write in. So he wanted to write, "To my readers, it's no use at all. The children won't let me stop telling tales of the land of Oz. I know lots of other stories, and I hope to tell them, sometime or another. But just now, my loving tyrants won't allow me. They cry, 'Oz, Oz, more about Oz, Mr. Baum.' And what can I do but obey their commands? This is our book, mine and the children's, for they have flooded me with thousands of suggestions in regard to it. And I have honestly tried to adopt as many of these suggestions as could be fitted into one story. After the wonderful success of Ozma of Oz, it is evident that Dorothy has become a firm fixture in these Oz stories. The little ones all love Dorothy, and as some of my small friends aptly state, it isn't a real Oz story without her. So, here she is again, as sweet and gentle and innocent as ever, I hope, and the heroine of another strange adventure. There were many requests from my little correspondents for more about the wizard. It seems the jolly old fellow made hosts of friends in the first Oz book, in spite of the fact that he frankly acknowledged himself a humbug. The children heard of how he mounted into the sky in a balloon, and they were all waiting for him to come down again. So what could I do but tell what happened to the wizard afterward? You will find him in these pages, just the same humbug wizard as before. There was one thing the children demanded which I found it impossible to do in this present book. They bade me introduce Toto, Dorothy's little black dog, who has many friends among my readers. But you will see, when you begin to read the story, that Toto was in Kansas while Dorothy was in California. So she had to start on her adventure without him. In this book, Dorothy had to take her kitten with her instead of her dog. But in the next Oz book, if I am permitted to write one, I'll intend to tell a good deal about Toto's further history. Princess Ozma, whom I loved as much as my readers do, is again introduced in the story, and so are several of our old friends of Oz. You will also become acquainted with Jim the cab horse, the 9 tiny piglets, and Eureka the kitten. I'm sorry the kitten was not well behaved as she ought to have been, but perhaps she wasn't brought up properly. Dorothy found her, you see, and who her parents were, nobody knows. Believe me, my dears, that I am the proudest storyteller that ever lived. Many a time, tears of pride and joy have stood in my eyes while I read the tender, loving, appealing letters that came to me in almost every mail from my little readers. To have pleased you, to have interested you, to have won your friendship, and perhaps your love through my stories, is to my mind as great an achievement as to become President of the United States. Indeed, I would much rather be your storyteller under these conditions than to be the President. So you have helped me to fulfill my life's ambition, and I am more grateful to you, my dears, than I can express in words. I try to answer every letter of my young correspondents, yet sometimes there are so many letters that a little time must pass before you get your answer. But be patient, friends, for the answer will surely come, and by writing to me, you more than repay me for my pleasant task of preparing these books. Besides, I'm proud to acknowledge that the books are partly yours, for your suggestions often guide me in telling the stories. I am sure I would not be half as good without your clever and thoughtful assistance. Frank L. Baum, Coronado, 1908. What a good man, right? I agree. He listens to his writers. And that to me is, what more could you ask? I'm really excited to continue reading these stories and seeing how he builds on them. Of course, Dorothy now being a staple of Oz, for those that recall, she actually wasn't in not the one we just finished, of course, she was there, but she wasn't in the Marvelous Land of Oz. That was all about Tip and his adventures, so it's kind of neat that he's sticking with the Dorothy theme. And I can only imagine what they're planning to get into next, so yeah, I really appreciate that. I appreciate Frank L. Baum and those words just passing through so many pages in history, and even more so in today, like present times. You can find books by what's his name, Gregory Gregory McGregor, something like that. But he went ahead and he's the one responsible for kind of like composing the Wicked story of the Wicked Witch of the East and North, or the West and North, how they came to be. And of course we all know that story now, but he wrote many other books about the Cowardly Lion and the like, so. But he did post articles about exterminating Americans also. Something of a product of his time, I guess. Ooh. Yeah, that's something I didn't know. And I'm sure you're not wrong. I'm sure it's a product of the time, as opposed to being a little bit frowned upon. But at the same time, don't have to follow his beliefs and ideals. I just hope it doesn't kind of come through in his stories. But I will say that in the first book, and even in some of this book, when he was calling her like a stupid girl and calling her a stupid fowl, like I was like, that's a little harsh for a kid's book. Publish, I guess. You don't publish newspaper. Publish, oh. Yeah, you don't post it. Yeah, I guess it would be print in the newspaper. Yeah. That is true. I should do some research on these authors. And one person that I wish I really could read more of is Shel Silverstein. I wish I could read his stuff. Those books drew my love of the written word just through the roof, with like Where the Sidewalk Ends and Light in the Attic and what was it, Falling Up. Yeah, Falling Up. As well as Dr. Seuss. I would love to read Dr. Seuss, and The Hobbit would be a fun read also, but that's not in the public domain yet, and I don't know why. But those are all things that I have planned. But we are going to start moving into our spooky season, y'all. So I do have a story for Christmas. We are going to read through the Christmas Carol at least once, and I think for Halloween, I don't know, I'm kind of caught between some of our favorite movie monsters like Frankenstein or Dracula. So I am going to make a post with like a poll for our Halloween read, and see how many Oz books we can fit in that time. Yeah, that's true as well. Kind of like they had to be something before they were something, and that makes sense too. And you still see that kind of nowadays, and a lot of the like sports journalists will become authors and whatnot. I just hope it's not something that he's known for. Like, I hope that this is more what he's known for. And be sure I'm going to be doing some research on that, because you just piqued my curiosity. Is there really 14 people in here? Man, you all really know how to make my Mondays great. And while I do have you all here, and we are just kind of wrapping it up, I did want to go ahead and share once again that I did receive this. This is from Radio Hobbies in the chat, Rafa. Really appreciate this, fam. I have the perfect spot for it on my wall. And there are little hidden ghosts absolutely everywhere, all over this thing, and I love it. And of course you got your little ghastly over here. But yeah, this was very well thought out, very well presented, so I'm going to display that in the back of myself with my other art there. I really appreciate you, Rafa. Big R vibes, absolutely, yep. He painted that. He painted it completely just out of the kindness of his heart, for the love of art and the channel. And I can't even say enough. Y'all really do make my day. And even these little reads. And I'm not sure if there is anybody else on right now. Is there anybody else streaming that you can see, Halia? Let's see. Lori, I don't know if you're still hanging around in the chat. Let's see. Let us see if there's anybody we can do a little mini raid to. Dagger vicariously, yeah, I only saw Dagger. We can go to Dagger. I'm not sure what Dagger's doing, but I'm sure it's something righteous and for a great cause, so yeah, if you want to just drop that link for me, Haley, and I appreciate you, and thank you all so much for coming in here and hanging out with us. Finishing up that book, I'm excited to start the next one and see where Dorothy ends up. We're going to go and just do a little mini raid on Dagger. He's always one to support the community in great ways, and he's one of those real-life superheroes and does a lot of great things for charity. So we can just pop in, say, little Pokey Ghost Read raid, and we'll end the night from there. But yeah, I really appreciate you all joining me. And remember to always go out and get everything that you want to get, and don't let anything stop you. But buffering wheel, oh no! Well, vicariously isn't a bad option either. I know that he has a little bit bigger of an audience. Buffer action. A little buffer action. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you, Haley, and I appreciate you, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day at work. I appreciate you being here and doing that for me. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and join up. Let's see here. Let's see. Alright, so we're going to go and raid Dagger, and we'll end our night. I'm not sure if he's having a little buffer action issue, but let's go and show our support here and help him reach his goal if we can. But I really appreciate you all, and thank you so much for believing in ghosts. You guys have a beautiful rest of your night.